Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. Well, we're here to talk about season 1 of Superman and Lois, a TV show that I rented it off of Apple. I don't really even know where you're supposed to watch it if you're in Canada.
I'm very
sure
glad you
there's,
brought
like,
that up.
I'm sure there's like Stack TV or something that has it, which I'm morally against, but whatever. It seems like everything's turning into Stack TV anyway.
I don't even know what Stack TV is, but I mean,
you can
like
pay to watch shows that like basically NBC has and stuff like that. Like you can watch Saturday Night Live on it. Like all the every show that's on Peacock you can watch through Stacked TV, but there is no version of it where you don't have to watch ads. And I'm just like, oh, like if I'm paying, I don't want ads. But everything is turning into having ads, so it's kind of a moot point at this point. Whoever Stack TV has won't have to worry because it's the same for them no matter what. They've always been paying for ads.
Yeah, I'm not about to say how I got access to this,
No,
but it is frustrating.
Don't talk about it. It's just
because
really annoying. Yeah,
it's super annoying because I was like, when I was on Google, it was like Amazon Prime has it. I'm like, I have that service, and then they're like, no, they don't.
No,
I'm like,
they just probably prompted you to buy Stack TV off of Amazon Prime.
Yes, they did. That's exactly what they did. And then I was like, no, screw this. And I was like, Apple TV. I'm like, oh, I don't want to pay for Apple TV because I have this huge thing where my Apple account is linked to my university account, my university email, which I don't have access to anymore. So I know they're sending
good reason.
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah.
And then now what they're doing is they're most likely sending me like I have the 7-day free trial, which is going to expire soon. I have to find a way to get my ADD to figure it out. But either way, it's like, oh, I'm signed on for Apple TV and I never actually used it because Apple TV doesn't even have this except for the availability to purchase or rent. And I'm like,
yeah, that's how I did it.
Damn. And when I was like, okay, well, I guess this is how we're going to do this. And then it was like per episode. I'm like, what the hell is that? That's not fun for anyone. Why is it rent for episode? It
says that until you go through the process. You can just buy the whole season.
Yeah, and then the whole season's like $30. And I'm like, well, what's the point of streaming this then? I just essentially own season 1 if that's the case. And yeah. Well, it's annoying.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
Which
Which it shouldn't be.
Kind of like the show proves, like there are no easy answers in life.
That's right.
No matter what you decide, there's going to be complications.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what won me over with the show. I think I was just like, you know what? Like I appreciate that. There's a lot of tropes I feel this show could have fallen into, and people would have been like, yeah, whatever. But they never give themselves outs. I feel like even if it's a character you're not supposed to like, they usually have a good point as well in terms of like where they're coming from.
Yeah.
An example I would use is Sam Lane, like Lois's dad.
Yep.
Like they ding him. They're like, oh, so you're just putting work ahead of the family. And then they ding him again when they're like, oh my goodness, you're so focused on us, but not. And he's like, so which one is it? Like either I don't care about the family or I care too much and I can't get it right. And I'm like, see, like I appreciate that they don't go for easy answers in the show. It is complicated, and I think it is probably the best deployment of Superman because you have the time to actually get into the intricacies of what would stress him out. I think that, I mean, in addition to me just thinking he looks good and he's able to, like, the show starts with him like, hey, thanks, my mom made it. Like the G golliness of him saying it like that is cool, but then you just see like the pressure he's under and the stress he has. And then even when it's a thing like, okay, fine, he told his kids, now things should be easy. And it's just like, well, no, now they feel bad about asking him for help now that they know he's super. And I was like, this is very interesting. I find a lot of the decisions made to be very interesting and making me lean in, as opposed to just being like, yeah, I get it. This is gonna happen. This is gonna
Hmm.
happen.
Yeah, this is definitely, I agree with you. This is definitely the most complex version or storytelling of Superman that I've ever seen. And that really caught me off by surprise. Like, and I'll expose my bias. I do not like Superman.
Yeah,
And
neither
the
do I.
reason
Yeah.
why is because every time I've seen Superman, it's been a very superficial take of Superman. I'm like, this guy is not complex. He's got everything going for him. He's cushy job. Oh, he's got like the love of his life. Everything's good, right? But that's movie format. And when it's movie format, it's almost always like, oh, okay, how is he going to get through this situation? It's about him figuring out the thing. But I'm like, this is not a situation to get through. It's him and a family and
Hmm.
trying to lead that way and still do two things at one time and seeing how his impact of his decision to go to Smallville has impacted his how the world sees him and as well and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, whoa, this is actually hugely deeply complicated.
Hmm.
Once you get past to me, one of the weaker elements of the show is the casting, especially the kids, and I just don't like the kids in this show. I mean, I think it's
Acting wise, or
Jordan.
how they're written.
I think uh, Jordan specifically, not Jonathan. I actually like Jonathan's character. I think he's pretty cool balance, but like Jordan's character is just like, oh man, acting wise and writing, it's just hard to get on board with this character. I get where he's coming from. It's
Hmm.
just like, and maybe that's why I don't like him. I'm like, oh man, I see too much of myself in you, and that's why I don't like it.
Because I do think that everyone is well written.
Yep.
I do think that the kids sometimes struggle with the material they're given.
Hmm.
Um, that's all I'll say. I don't want to dwell too much on that as a negative. Like, I'm sure they can grow into it. The show has 4 seasons. Like,
Yeah.
maybe they'll get better. But I do think that one compliment I gave the show to a friend was like, honestly, anytime I'm like, oh my god, this is so annoying, like the show had an answer for why they did that. Like,
Yep.
and even if it's episodes later, you're like, that paid off. Like, me being annoyed in this moment is still like justified later on, even if it's in the same episode or episodes later.
Hmm.
So yeah, like there's a lot of times where I'm like, oh my god, Jordan, you're. But then you're like, as you said, I understand where he's coming from, and I understand, and I think what they did with Jonathan. So I guess we can just go through the characters. If people
Hmm.
don't know this show is the Superman that was introduced, I think, in Supergirl, which is a show I did like.
Yes.
Um, Moves to Smallville, and I do believe this is after like Crisis on Infinite Earth. So he is not.
Yeah.
He's not with the other. Well, he must be because he got Diggles in one of the episodes.
Diggle's
You
in
know what? I
there.
don't care.
So
It doesn't
yeah.
matter. It doesn't matter. I know that the writers wanted it to be like this is a fresh start, but obviously there is moments where people from other shows come in. Well, just
Yep.
one, but still, he's a big one. Like
Hmm.
one of the OG characters from
Yeah.
this universe
Diggle's
shows up.
huge.
Yeah,
Diggle's awesome.
and his wife is referenced, Layla. Like it's not like
Yep.
they're not completely removed, but obviously they don't have access to all the. I mean, in story, not like in real life. I just mean
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
story, there is a reason why Green Arrow and Flash aren't just showing up.
Yep.
But I just don't really know what it is, and it doesn't matter ultimately. The
Hmm.
point is, he's moved to Smallville because his mom just died, and
Hmm.
he thinks this will be helpful. And you are watching as his kids find out that he's Superman, and them basically being like, let's not do secrets anymore. As a family, we are
Hmm.
going to share everything with each other because this will help. And I think an interesting thing in it as well is Lois Lane's dad knows Superman is Kent Clark.
Yep.
And so
Clark Kent.
again, sorry, yeah, Clark Kent. Clark Kent. That doesn't make things easier either because it's
Hmm.
like, well, you have a job to do. Even though I like that Superman always pushes back and he's like, that's not my job. Like I
Hmm.
choose to help. That's not my job to
Yeah.
help. But yeah, so there's always that balance. As I said, like the show kind of pushes him through. You really see him have to go through the paces as a human, a son, a son-in-law, a father, a husband, like and a hero. Like every aspect of him is pushed to the limits, and I thought that they did a good job of pushing him to the limits without you being like, "Oh, this is too intense all the time."
Yeah, I agree because at the end of the day, the frustrating thing about Superman is because he's so super, he's so powerful that like really, yeah, there's no real threat that we're convinced of as an audience, but it doesn't mean his conflict isn't real. And that to me after watching this season, makes his conflict in his personal life that much more real, and
Hmm.
that's what makes it like this has probably captured my attention the most out of every other iteration of Superman, because it's got such a good balance of all those different things. It's just okay. I am primarily just interested in Superman and Lois, the titular characters, right? It's just every time they go to anyone else, I'm like, can we get back to the two that are, you
So
know?
that is what I would say is
Mhm.
even though the show's called Superman and Lois, it really feels like it's the Jordan and John show.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, I and I don't have a problem with that. I understand why you, but I think that the Lois part kind of lags because even though, as I said, even when you're like, why is this happening? It always comes back together and is
Mhm.
justified. So the Lois stuff really comes to the fore like halfway through the season.
Mhm.
Basically, when you find out the identity of another character, you see how all the stuff that she was basically doing on the side comes together to be the main thing. I
Yeah.
think as a fresh start, it's too much time of her doing her own thing
Yes.
away from Superman and the kids
Mhm.
for me to be like, this feels like Superman and Lois, the
Mhm.
way Falcon and the Winter Soldier actually felt like it was about the both of them, or WandaVision felt like it was about the both of them.
Mhm.
This was just like, well, yeah, Lois is here too, and I'm not saying what she's doing is unimportant
Mhm.
even before you find the big reveal. It's just, you're like, why don't they do more together
Yeah.
for a show that's called Superman and Lois?
And that's exactly it. And like throughout the middle of the season, I was just like, oh, okay, this is why the show wasn't working because they weren't working together. Now that they're
Hmm.
working together, it's starting to actually pick up and do things. And I'm like, it's actually cool now. I like it. So it's just like, okay, there's a rhyme and a reason for this. And it's one of those things where I'll always like I've said this consistently with the CW series of like their portrayals of these characters. Their writing is super well done. They have such good writing in their shows. And it's just like it comes down to the limitations come down to acting and budget and all
Hmm.
those kind of things, which is fine. Like I'm not going to be like, "Oh, this needs to be the best thing." Like they do good with the budget that
I
they
would
have
say I
here.
would agree. I think for a TV budget, they do really well,
Hmm.
and I think um, the other information I have from after watching the season is that one of the female writers complained about how anything they did to try and really highlight Lois was kind of shot down by the studio. Like, well, we're not
Mm.
really here for that. So I think part of my frustration with context now is like, oh, that might have just been out of their hands. I don't actually think that was a fault on their
Right.
part. It seems like they wanted it to be the Superman and Lois show, and
Hmm.
the studio was like, no, we want it to be Superman and Lois can be there.
Yeah, and then that's a bad decision by the studio because I'm like to me I'm like I'm fundamentally whenever I have Superman and Lois I'm so much more interested in Lois and her story
Well,
because she
because of
does
what she
so
says when she's like,
yeah.
what she says to Jonathan, which is like, we are the extraordinary humans that are with the super powered people. Like,
Bingo, that's it.
that is what is that what's that's what makes Lois Lane an interesting character is that
Yep.
you don't feel like she's just there for her looks when she's paired with Superman. Like, she is a
Hmm.
formidable character to be around, and
Yep.
I think it took a while, but I liked ultimately what they did with Jonathan, which was like, you keep like, I
Hmm.
think you might watch it thinking like, well, he'll get powers too or something. Like, okay, that's not fair if only one kid gets powers. Sorry, Jordan has Superman powers in this
Yeah.
show, which is interesting only because people know in the comics Jonathan Kent is Superboy and has and has taken over as Superman in
Yeah.
some way. But so I even like that kind of meta thing of like, no, not the one you think it's gonna be.
Not what you
Um,
expect, baby. Yeah.
but yeah, also interesting, writing wise, interesting that the one that's named after Superman's Kryptonian father is the one that got powers,
Hmm.
not the one that's named for his Earth father. But yeah, so there's this thing where, and I fell into the trap when they find the Superman stuff, but the like pipes fall on them. I was like, oh yeah, clearly Jonathan saved Jordan. Like, that's
Yeah.
what's happened here. And they show you him throwing a football so hard that it like basically knocks a tire down. Like, you're like, yeah, yeah, okay, he's got powers.
Yeah.
But no, he just actually. I like what he says even then when he's like, this actually makes me feel better that I'm actually just really good at that. Then
Yeah.
he's
A
like,
hundred
actually, that
percent.
I think we've both said it. That's what I like about how the Suns are written
Mhm.
is that they could have just fallen into like the whiny teenagers, but
Hmm.
I like that they are genuinely thinking about things, like, so that they're like, so yeah, Jonathan can be like, I mean, I don't have powers, but also that means that all the things I could do really well before are actually me and not like just something that was out of my control. I mean, to some extent, it's out of control, but it's not superpowers. It is just raw talent that I
Yeah,
have
it's
that I
not.
can keep working on.
Yeah, not genetic lottery or anything like that. And I think that when he says that, I'm like, I like this guy. I like this
Yeah.
guy a lot because he's really mature for his age and he's not doing all those guys. Does he have
Or
his moments?
yeah.
Absolutely. He's
Oh
a
no, they're
teenager.
teenagers. They're not
But
gonna get it
yeah.
right every time. But I like when he's like, I need to leave. He's like,
Hmm.
you left. I need to leave.
Hmm.
And I even liked how his parents reacted, which was more super mood. He's just like, give this a little more than 3 days, and
Hmm.
if things aren't working out, we can revisit it. This it wasn't a no or like absolutely not. It was just like, I get why you need to leave. I
Yep.
understand that, but maybe see if this is something that can work, because the
Yeah.
point of this was for us to actually be together. And Jordan, I think, yeah, like I think a lot of his angst is, I don't think this is the commentary they were making, but it's how I
Hmm.
feel like about when you see like white people get angry about hearing about privilege, which is like, well, I mean, I'm the one that did get the superpowers. I still suck. So
Yeah.
this is not great. I don't love this. He's like,
Yeah.
you're still pretty much better than me, and you don't even have superpowers.
Yeah, I like when like the there's not a lot of scenes that I like about Jordan, and it's not his fault, but there is one scene that I particularly like where he's breaking down in front of Lois, being vulnerable and being like, I thought when I had superpowers, people would love me.
Hmm.
And it's just made me distance myself, made me more alone than ever before. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel for this kid because like
Hmm.
he clearly had in Metropolis, like, and we're told this
Yeah, they bullied
repeatedly,
him. Yeah.
yeah, that he was bullied. He was like, so I get why he's the way he is. I get why he's so like, oh, it's all about me, all this kind of stuff, and he's in his own fields because nobody else would do that. But it's just when we get to that part where he's like, this is the one thing I thought would answer everything, and
Hmm.
it hasn't. I'm like, yeah, there's depth to this character. It's not just angsty stuff that's on the surface. It's a lot deeper than that, and it's really, really good to see. It's refreshing. I don't hate him so much, but I do find him annoying.
Yeah. Or
That's
I
about it.
like when his brother ruins his date with Sarah,
Yeah.
and and instead of being like fuck you, he's like, I get what's wrong.
Yep.
I understand why you got drunk. I understand why you're acting out. It's more important for me to be here for you right now than to get angry
Hmm.
about what you just did to me, because he would be completely within his rights to be like, fuck you for making me look so bad in front of the date. You know what that meant to me,
Yeah.
and you ruined it. But he just was like, no, you know what, like, let me take care of you.
Yeah.
I understand what's wrong.
Yeah. And when Jonathan is like, football's my thing. Like, and he's getting like a little jealous and a little
Hmm.
insecure about it. I'm like, I get where he's coming from. And this is the angsty stuff I don't like coming from Jonathan. But then Jordan goes like, you don't own football. And he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's right. You don't own that kind of shit. It's just it's interesting, and it's very, very like after you get past like, okay, they are like, once I accepted they are teenage boys. They're gonna have conflict. It's gonna be angsty. It's gonna be whatever. But once you get past that, what's driving the conflict is actually really, really good.
Hmm.
Like it's really good writing.
The only character I was like, you need to get the fuck out of here is the coach. I was just like, this football coach
Coach
is like a
sucks.
comic villain, like, or like
Yeah.
what is happening here? I don't mean a comic, a cartoonish villain is what I meant to say, not a comic
Yeah.
book villain. Like, there's what, like, the first thing that I was like, this makes no sense at all was when he's like, you got to run laps for hiding this from me. I'm like, he's not the assistant coach. What the fuck are you talking about? You're gonna punish him for not like forcing his brother on you? Like, this is
Yeah.
I don't. And then there's one scene where he just flat out mocks him in the hallway, like he comes out of nowhere to be like, and I'm just like, I don't understand who wrote this character or why they think this is a good idea.
Yeah, that's
They
the scene
already
where
had a bunch of bullies.
Jonathan's
Like, they already
yeah.
had a bunch of bullies. I didn't understand why they're like, and the coach is a bully too.
Yeah, that didn't make sense to me. Like, and that scene you're probably talking about, like Jonathan, like asking out this girl, and the girl was like, "Oh no, thank you. I was just giving you
Yeah.
attention because you." And then he goes like, "Oh, that's an L or something." I'm like, "What the hell is going on? Like, you can't bully your own students, expect or your own like athletes, and expect to get the best out of them on the field. What the hell is going on here? This is
Yeah,
terrible."
he just wasn't written like an adult. He
Well,
was
I
written
mean,
like a kid. Like, what I mean by that is adults can bully, but the way he was bullying was like Jonathan was his equal.
Yeah, I
Like you
agree.
can bully as a teacher. I'm not saying bullying only happens with kids, but I'm saying he wasn't written as if he was bullying as an adult. He was
Yeah,
written like he was bullying like he was just another student at the school.
yeah. I mean, totally adults can bully. I mean, look at Bill Belichick.
No, but it's
Boom.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like when you think of bullying as Bill Belichick, it's not someone who's like going na 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 boo boo. Like it's there's oomph behind it. There's like a little bit
Yep.
more of the power imbalance.
Absolutely. The Belichick kind of coaching is like, I don't care if you're the best quarterback. Like you're nothing compared to me. Like I'm the head of the ship. But like that kind of bullying of
Hmm.
always pulling rank. This is you're absolutely right. It's like, why are you bullying him like you're actually a student as well? Like
Yeah,
that doesn't
it
make
did.
any sense. And it's weird. It's just so weird. The coach is like terrible. But I'm glad that the coach doesn't actually get a lot of screen time, to be
No, he
honest.
doesn't, and I hope that he's not really around in second, third, and fourth season. But like,
Same.
or that they just do a complete overhaul on the character.
Or like,
Like
he gets
hopefully they
replaced.
watched season one and they're like, because they did have a big break. We're watching it obviously now. I'd never seen it before,
Hmm.
but when it was airing, it was during like COVID, so they had a big break
Hmm.
because of COVID between episode 5 and 6. So maybe
Hmm.
they had time to be like, oh, well, the season's a season, but maybe we could fix this for season two.
Hmm. Hmm. The other character I didn't like too much was Lana Lang's husband.
He made sense to me though.
He
I don't
made
like I don't
sense.
like him, but I say I don't like the coach because he doesn't make sense.
Yes.
I think there are unlikable characters in the show for sure. Lana Lang's
Hmm.
husband is one of them,
Yeah.
but that made sense to me versus the coach, where I'm just like, what choice is this?
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. It's not because the coach like the Lana Lang's
Like Kyle, his name's Kyle.
Kyle. Of course it is. Of course. I didn't like Kyle because it was like I understood him. I'm like everything about this makes sense, but I'm just like, oh, on some level, he's just being as angsty as the teenagers are right now, and that really doesn't sit well with me. And
Well,
like because Lana is constantly like, you have to do this, you have constantly reminding him, like, dude, like take a hit. Like everyone's telling you to take a back seat right now, and you're just like, but I'm this, I'm this. I'm like, shut up, just shut
but
up. You
that
made a
that
mistake.
felt like the commentary that I was talking
Yes.
about earlier. That felt like I feel like an impotent man and I need some way to be powerful.
Yeah.
And so that's why I liked it when he found out that Lana actively made it so that he couldn't be one of the test subjects. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So in this show also Superman's half brother comes to Smallville because this is the population that is the most susceptible to his plan to put the spirits or the consciousness of old
Mhm.
Kryptonians into human bodies so that they'll have Kryptonian powers and be able to take over.
Right.
And that's because at that site where the crash happened, that would have put out all the materials needed for people, for humans to be susceptible to that
Mhm.
working overtime instead of for just for a few hours.
Yes. Which to
uh
me, beautifully written, because at the same time, you're just like, yeah, why would a millionaire care so much about this small
yeah, I was
town?
so happy when they were like, you know what, he's dropping the millionaire or the billionaire act. He's just a Kryptonian. And I was just
Absolutely.
like, okay, thank goodness, because I was just like, what the fuck are they doing with this guy?
Yeah. So when they were like, why does he care so much about this town? I'm like, oh, they explained it. Okay,
Yeah.
good. I'm fine with this now. I get it. I
And
get
I
it.
like that it was like half brother instead of Zod or something like that. Not
Yes.
that I was kind of like, oh, maybe they could still bring back Zod, but I was just like, oh, like to me, this is something new. Maybe it's not new to people who read Superman comics regularly,
Mhm.
but I'm like, oh, this is new. And the thing looming over the season that we haven't talked about yet is they introduced the character of John Henry Irons,
Mhm.
who for I still don't really understand why is introduced as Captain Luther at first.
I'm so glad you said that
And I was like, I
too.
don't really get why he was, but ultimately it doesn't matter. It's an alias that only him and his AI use because he uses a completely different name when he talks to humans.
Yes.
Uh, um, but he's John Henry Irons, the Man of Steel character I like
Mhm.
before the Shaq movie came out, and then I was kind of quiet about it. But they completely did a revamp on him. He's
Mhm.
really good in this. But his whole thing is Superman killed everyone on my planet
Yep.
or on my Earth. Like you, that's how the Arrowverse kind of brings it back in. They were talking about multiversal stuff,
Yep.
and so he's like, yeah, on my Earth, I was married to Lois Lane. We had the daughter that Lois Lane actually had a miscarriage with on this Earth. we
Hmm.
actually had Natalie, and he killed Lois. And you're like, oh, I see how, even though it fixes the Batman v Superman problem I had, which was like, in Batman v Superman, I was just like, well, Batman's just wrong. I just know he's wrong. And there's nothing that's gonna.
Yes.
Versus this show was just like, they kept, like, they built it up little by little, but they're like, at first you're like, well, no, he's Superman, he's not. But then it's like, well, maybe if he is faced with like, this is family instead of just some other Kryptonian, like, and he does feel that guilt of like, I could have looked for my brother. I didn't even try. I didn't even
Hmm.
try to look for him. And he's like, and the brother's like, and we can bring back our mom. They only share a mom. They don't share Jor-El as a
Hmm.
father. But like, we can bring our mom back. And you're like, oh, maybe he would, even if he's not going to destroy everything. Maybe that emotional aspect would lead to the fall of this earth anyway, even if he's not the one that's lasering people. That you're like, okay, like there is some reason for Steel to be like, nah, I gotta kill this guy. Like he's
Yeah.
gonna ruin things.
Yeah.
And then you're like, then it comes down to what I think the show does really well, which is like, he has to protect his family. At one point, he's just like, "You gotta kill me because I don't want to lose my. I don't want to be the one who
Hmm.
kills my family,
Hmm.
and I can't fight this right now." Um. So yeah, I thought they did a good job of fixing that issue for
Yeah.
me. That there's someone who is a good guy but is in opposition to Superman, but you're not like, well, you're just dumb because this isn't gonna. You're just like, he started off like that for me, but the
Hmm.
show did a good job of being like, nope, this he is right to be concerned.
Yes, and it's such a good way that he actually changes his opinion in the sense where it's like they get this world's Lois, which is his wife and his the
Hmm.
love of his life and all that kind of stuff on his world to actually drive that discussion going forward. It's like this is why, and it's like because he's the love of my life, and like he loves me, and he's got this family, he's got stakes in the game, he's got skin in the game, is basically what she
Hmm.
says to him, and like that really does. And I like what you said about Lois's empathy because it's that element of that empathy that she brings forward to him that's like that gets him to actually look at it differently instead of a
Yeah,
Martha
he says
moment.
it doesn't change anything, but I
Yeah.
think he'd already started building that case when
Yeah.
earlier in the season he's like, "Well, do you trust him?" And she's like, "Yeah, with my whole heart." Again, he says, "Well, I thought you'd say that, but whatever." But I think before he knows who Superman is to her, and she says, "I still trust him with everything."
Hmm.
I think that changes things because it doesn't seem like people trusted Superman in that world. It
Yeah.
feels like he was just evil.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it just feels like the argument obviously the whole time during the show is, well, he's different from your Superman because he's not a bad guy,
Hmm.
and I'm kind of like, yeah, like that should be enough. But as I said, the show did a good job of being like, no, this little nugget here, this little nugget here, things could go wrong even if he doesn't turn evil.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, as you said, when Lois is like, well, he loves me, that's why I know he's not going to turn on us,
Hmm.
which I still argue was what Batman v Superman was getting at. It's just
Yes.
not great execution, but
Hmm.
it was how important his mom and Lois are to him in the Snyder verse.
Yeah.
That's what would keep him from destroying everything.
Absolutely.
But this show obviously is a show, so it has more time to ruminate on that and show you different versions of that conversation
Yeah.
happening and how that conversation evolves and how, as we talked about with like Black Panther, you see a character collect information and then make a decision
Hmm.
as opposed to just being like, no, this is what has to happen.
Yeah, it's not like this boneheaded, stubborn kind of no, I have to do it. Like this is my mission. It's like no, you got new information now. You need to change that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I respect about the characters a lot, especially John Henry Irons, because yeah, he's dead set on it, and I'm just like everything about it, his backstory, his like the fact that he lost his daughter as well through this whole thing. I'm just like yeah, that would create a very driven person that's, not usually open to hearing a different perspective, but they do it in such a great, great way here. I wish they did call him Steel at one point though, because like,
Well,
a
he
lot
says
of
I'm the Man of
people,
Steel, which is technically how they refer to him.
sure, like,
He's like, you're
yeah, I
not the
must
Man of
have
Steel,
missed
I'm
that.
the Man of Steel. Yeah.
Yeah.
When he first like fights him with the hammer, he's like, you're not the Man of Steel. He grabs the hammer. He's like, I'm the Man of Steel, which is
Right,
technically
right.
how he's referred to.
Yeah.
The Man of Steel, Steel for short. But
Yeah.
I know Superman also can be called Man of Steel, but I thought they got there. The only thing is they didn't put the S on his chest, which makes sense for a season 1 because he's still thinking he's going to distance himself from all this.
Yeah, and he's gonna be like, "Hey, I don't want to wear the symbol of that of the guy that killed my
Yeah,
wife." Yeah, that makes
all of that
perfect
makes
sense.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
but they got there. I think
Mhm.
for the comic accuracy of it, it's just I didn't love the Nat Bug thing when you think he's going to do the S, even though we both said why he wouldn't in this season.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, he's doing that. No, it's the Nat Bug. All right, fair enough.
That's fine. I'm okay
Fair
with
enough.
that. I'm like, it was sweet because like the daughter's like, now I'll be a part of you. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that's good. That's really good stuff.
So yeah, the whole reveal basically that he's John Henry Irons, he's from this other Earth, and watching Jonathan and Lois take different parts of it. So Jonathan's like, "Holy shit! Like my dad kills my mom in this reality,"
Mhm.
or Lois being like, "I had Natalie," who again they show you later when she's like, "We're pregnant," and I'm telling you right now, I want it to be a girl and I want her name to be Natalie. You're just like, so that is so upsetting. It's truly upsetting that that was taken from her.
Mhm.
Um, and that she goes to therapy for it. They do say she only did one session of therapy during the miscarriage. Obviously, we see her later in life taking therapy more seriously, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I like that information comes back up on, and the show doesn't hit you over the head with it. There's just like there's a moment where that mom's like, well, you won't know what it's like to lose someone, and just the silent acting of I
Mhm.
think her name's Elizabeth Tulloch, like that she kills
Yes.
it when you're like, well, we know, and she just she signaled what she signaled there.
Yep.
And then one of my favorite scenes is when she gets mad at Jonathan for going back into the RV and getting stuck and almost killed.
Yep.
And she's just like, fuck you, man. Like, I trusted you. I gave you a chance and you still did what you did.
Mhm.
Obviously, you shouldn't say this to someone, but she's like, and it would have been your fault if you died. No one else's fault but yours. And she's just like, what? And she's like, get out of my face. I was like, holy fuck. All
That
right.
was ruthless. That was
But
ruthless. I'm like,
then
Lois,
when she
bringing
comes back to him, she's
fire.
like, I'm sorry. This is
Yes.
why I reacted the way I did. It's one of the moments where I was like, yeah, see, the kid playing Jonathan, I don't think he got there fully with the crying. Like, it just felt like he jumped to it because he knew he had to cry. But
Yep.
on paper, it's an amazing scene.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think it's an amazing scene. The crying included, that they have that vulnerable moment before she says what she says about how they're the extraordinary people. Just that she wasn't like, well, I'm the parent, so yeah, I got mad at you, get over it. She's like, no, that wasn't right. That's
Mhm.
not how I should have handled that. Um, but I know what it's like to lose a loved one and feel helpless. You, your actions brought me back there again, and
Yep.
I'm sorry.
That it was incredibly profound to see Lois in that moment, right? Because you're right. Like what she says to Jonathan before that is just like, oh yeah, we're reminded how good your words are. Like that was ruthless when I heard that. I was like, what is
Mm-hmm.
happening? And then her apology, amazing. Hit every note that I want a perfect apology to be. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, this is wild. This is so good. They're not talking down to them. They're just
No,
they are actually like being honest and no more secrets. And like as and when no more secrets happens is like when Lois later on in the season has to be like, I have to withhold certain parts of this because she obviously knows all the
with
story
the person from the
from
Gazette.
yes,
Yeah, she
absolutely.
has to be withholding it because we didn't bring this up, but
Yeah.
she gets fired early on.
Well, no, she technically quit.
She quits.
Yeah.
Uh, Clark is the one that was like, "You can fire me,"
Yes.
from the Daily Planet, and then Lois quits. That's why they go to Smallville. Even though you don't find out she quit until after they're in Smallville, but
Yeah. She quits after
either way,
they're in
well, I don't think
there for
that's the
sure.
case. I think it's just they wanted to save that reveal. I think it was like they both
Mm,
were like, "We're not working there anymore." They moved
right,
to
right, right,
Smallville.
right.
But yeah, so she's working at the Smallville Gazette with a character who has the same last name as Super Monkey in the comics. So I'm not quite sure what they're doing.
Mm,
Beppo is Beppo the Super Monkey.
okay.
So I'm just like, all right, well, I don't know what they're doing with there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, IMDb also lists her as Bizarro, and I'm just like, well, that seems like a spoiler for seasons later.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
but
IMDb doing that for
but
sure.
anyway, because that never comes up in this season at all.
No, I can't
Um,
imagine it would. But it's just like and my point of bringing that up is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like
Sorry.
Lois really cares about everything she does, and she's like, I could really see her being put in that difficult position when she's like, I'm only going to reveal what is necessary,
Hmm.
and then also trying to get her dad to do it, and then her dad being like, hey, bring up the very good point of like, hey, if I did tell the truth, do you think this would make anything actually better, or do you think it would panic people? And just like, they need to know what they need to know,
Hmm.
and that's about it. And it's like, it's really interesting to see how the town all of a sudden gets super populated and super passionate about like, well, why are you here? All this kind of stuff. I'm like, this is great stuff. This is like,
It's really well done.
yeah, it legitimizes journalism and journalistic integrity to that degree. And when she's like, I have to withhold to that person, and she's like building that trust back up to be like, no, I'm actually going to put my money where my mouth is and actually put half the money down or whatever to kind of continue doing our independent gazette. I'm like, this is great Lois
Yeah,
stuff. This is
yeah.
fantastic.
Um, what was I gonna say? I don't remember what I was gonna say. But yeah, I think the other complaint I have about the season is it didn't feel like the 15 episodes were like ordered properly or something, because
Mm,
to me the end of this season should have been like the turn for John Henry Irons when he's like, yeah, okay, you're not the bad guy, and then they
mhm.
help to defeat I don't know what his real name was, but Morgan Edge. Like I felt like, okay, yeah, we're done now. But I think that happens with like 3 more episodes left to go, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
as you said, like things get there, like the escalation of how the town is reacting to this event. It's all interesting stuff. It's not necessarily stuff I would cut, but I just felt like we had such a high, and now it kept like ramping up and coming down in those last 3 episodes.
I agree. It was like watching the Return of the King, Lord of the Rings movie, where it's like, which ending are we sticking with right now? Because you've done this 3 or 4 times
Mm-hmm.
already, and that's what I felt with the last 3 episodes. And I'm glad you brought that up because I'm like, that wasn't the season finale.
Well,
What?
because
That
because
would have
Morgan
been
Edge
so
keeps
good.
breaking out, and you're like, oh, like so. Anytime I saw those kryptonite cuffs come out, I'm like, well, I mean, it's probably gonna break out because we got 2 more episodes, or we have 1 more episode. Like, I
Yeah.
don't, I don't know why we're going through these motions. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really weird. But they get to a satisfying place
yes,
toward
they
the
do,
end. They
they
really
do.
really
I,
do.
I just that's why I didn't say it was too long or something. I just felt like they could have reordered some stuff so it didn't
Mhm.
feel as up and down.
Yeah,
Because, as I said, I don't think there's anything I would necessarily cut out of the season.
right.
It's just more how it feels to sit through it.
Yeah. And one thing I did find interesting about the episode layouts was that the majority of the action is in the middle of the episode, where usually I'm used to like action in the beginning, conflict resolution, like figuring things out in the middle, and then action towards the end again. But I think it's very smart to sandwich the human aspects of what they're trying to do with the action in the middle. And because it's just like, hey, yeah, we get that Superman's like what you're here to see, but here's the important stuff that makes
Hmm.
Superman interesting. I thought that was really smart. So like, even in that final app of the season finale, where it's like the majority of the stuff is done, the action stuff is done by Act 2. Act 3 is like a really good just kind of wrap up of everything and being like, yeah, this is a better, more cohesive family unit now going forward, including Sam, like the General Lang
Yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. It's just a much more the show knows what it wants to do, and it does it very well, I think.
I think that's what season 1 taught me. Like,
Hmm.
I'm in good hands storytelling wise. Every time I
Hmm.
tried to like not trust it, it proved itself.
Yep.
Uh, what I wanted to bring up now, I remember, is the what happened with Jonathan Jordan and Sam, where he was like, "You guys need to leave your father alone. You're distracting him."
Yes.
And so then there's a point where they don't use their button soon enough for Superman, or not soon
Mm.
enough, but they use it much later when things got really bad. And Superman's like, "Why wouldn't you?" I'm like, "Holy shit! Oh, they're gonna go there then. Like, that's
Yeah.
great. That it's like this guy thought he said something that's gonna." And as I said, is a trope that could have been like, okay, well, they're always just gonna be like, well, we're never gonna bother our dad because, yeah, we don't want to distract him.
Hmm.
And then Superman's like, no, that never put that on my kids. They don't
Yeah.
have to adhere to anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
I am here to protect everyone, and that includes my kids. You can't tell them that they're a distraction to me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just really like that. Or when Jonathan has the conversation with his grandfather, and he's like, so the difference between me and you is I would never be afraid of my family. You
Hmm.
obviously are. Like, you learn that Sam has enough kryptonite to take out all of Krypton, basically, and they've got all these weapons there that at one point give um, Superman a version of like pneumonia, and it basically almost kills Jordan
Yeah.
because he passes it on, and Jonathan just has this talk about like, yeah, like I don't understand how you could be so afraid of your own family. How do
Hmm.
you not trust that we love you, or like that we're not a threat to you? And then Sam tries to be like, well, you haven't seen what I've seen. And he's like, yeah, I just don't think that would make a difference to me. And we know that he has seen his dad turn,
Yeah.
but he doesn't use that in that moment. He's just like, I just don't think that would make a difference to me.
Hmm.
And so then it's more showing and not telling, because it's like, yeah, he has seen what his dad is capable of, and he's
Hmm.
not like, oh yeah, I guess we should be worried about him.
Yeah, yeah, it's good stuff in those moments. Those the testing the character and the steel of the character in that moment. And that's why I really really like Jonathan is it's the idea of like, yeah, you're not the hot shot quarterback that you thought you were going to be or
Yeah,
that
he's
you were in
QB2.
Metropolis. You're QB2 now. You're doing all this kind of stuff. Your arm's broken and that was because you decided to protect your family over a situation, all that kind of stuff. It's really really good consistent stuff that he's delivering, which is why I really like his character, even though he can get a little angsty and like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said,
No,
whatever.
I do think
Yeah.
I like both of them. I find it sometimes annoying how
Hmm.
much of a teenager Jordan can be, but again, I think that they're both well written enough for me to understand where they're coming from. Obviously,
Hmm.
Jonathan is making choices I like better, but
Yes.
it's still like I 100% get what Jordan's issue is. Like,
Yeah.
you've already said what it is, but I just thought like that's really compelling to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's like it's annoying, but it's well done.
Hmm.
And that's why I'm like I don't hate them. I just find it annoying. And then I'm
Yeah,
like, yeah, okay, but that's I would get annoyed with any teenager.
yeah.
That's the reality of who I am. I'm not afraid to admit that. To see past that and be like, all right, these characters are really well written. Of course he would have this chip on his shoulder, being bullied and
But
all
I
his
think both
life.
of them have their moments where like I get why you're upset right now. Like
Oh,
you're
100%.
fully even before his hand gets broken, because he even says like the doctor said I might not have full use of this again.
Hmm.
Like you fucked me, uh, and I like that the parents were both like, Jordan, it doesn't matter that you didn't mean for that to happen. Like it happened, and he's 100% right to be mad at you. I was like,
Yep.
oh, this is some good talk right here.
Yeah, it's
He's like,
really,
you
really
need to let
good.
him be mad at you. That's it. That's all it's gonna be. You know he loves you and that he's gonna forgive you, so you just need to let him be mad at you now.
Yeah, I'm not mad at Jordan for trying to play the victim in that situation of
Yeah.
being like, I had no control. Like this is what I would have been so much more mad at Clark and Lois for letting it slide. And the fact that Clark does not let it slide is like, it doesn't matter. It still happened, and that's still your fault. It's just like, this is great stuff. This is
Hmm.
good stuff because it's just like, yeah. And when Clark has that revelation of like he always is holding back no matter what, and to relate that to Jordan is just like it's really good stuff because obviously as a teenager you have this trope of thinking like nobody understands, and I'm like, no, you got someone that understands, so actually like connect with him. That's really
Yeah,
really
like I
good.
have been a teenager before, and I've also been a teenager with superpowers before, so I can
Yeah.
truly connect with you
Hmm.
on this. And I do like that he gets so excited for his kids as well,
Hmm.
like a little nerd. Like when he's like, "Is this a date?" and you're like, because the first way the way he was asking, it was kind of like, "Oh, is he gonna be like annoying about this?" But he was just like, "Oh, great! Like, yeah, I'm so happy for you." Or when he hits the log properly instead of breaking his hand, and he's just like, "Yeah, you did it, you did it." I'm
Yeah.
just like, "Yeah, good for him." And I like there's that scene where during the practice he knocks out the guy who's he knocks out Sarah's ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
Not knocks him out, but knocks him over.
Mhm.
And you think he can take that time to shit on him, but he's just like, I shouldn't have kissed your girlfriend. That's my problem. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
And he helps him up, and that Clark sees that, and Clark can be like, all right, so he's not gonna be an asshole
Yeah.
about this. Good.
Yeah. It's a good, it's good stuff that they do there actively. And oh god, yeah, it's a very, very well written show. I think Lana Lang's character, though, we haven't discussed her too much.
I found her very interesting until I was like, oh, she's just good, which is fine.
Mhm.
But I was just like, oh no, she's up to something. She's gonna fuck. And then what the show does, as we said, that's good writing. Was once it's clear like she's just a good person, they just put her in this impossible situation where it's like,
Yes.
oh shit, like she's the face of all these people getting their lives ruined now.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter if I'm like wondering if she's good or bad. You're just like, oh, no, like she's really going through it right now. Like
hmm
she's in a bad place right now, and it makes her still interesting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's really, really good. I think she definitely gets better as the season progresses because in that beginning spot, you're like, this is weird that they would put Lana Lang here between Superman and Lois, but also have Lana have her own family, and it's this weird
Especially because the
interaction.
daughter, who they just get rid of at one point,
Yes.
was like, you dated him, you still like it. That's why Daddy gets mad at you. I'm like, so are they gonna do something? Like that's why I was like, well, she's up to something, but that just seemed to be information that was not needed at all.
That's
Like,
exactly what I thought. I was
this
just
is
like,
like,
I
oh,
don't know
this
if
was
I
irrelevant.
trust her. I don't know if I trust her because of this. But and that I'm glad you pointed it out. It was like super weird that all of a sudden the youngest daughter
It's
was
like
like,
Sophia or something that just always goes to
yeah,
the grandma.
yeah.
And
It's
they were
like,
like,
where the hell were you?
why did
the
you even write
entire
it that she
time?
has 2 kids then? You could have just had
Yeah.
you just need 1 kid for this show.
It's like you needed one kid that's young enough to not know social cues to be like, yeah, it's because you two dated before.
It
This is why
does
this
feel
is
like that is exactly why she was there, just
yeah.
for that line, and then to go away.
It's like, yeah, we don't need you anymore. It's
Because
like we
even the
have child
episode where it's
acting
like,
rules.
even when the episode is like, oh, Sarah has to take care of Sophia, she gets kidnapped. So it's like, and nothing bad happens to Sophia. She's just like, oh yeah, like I woke up and I guess she's gone. I don't know. And you're like,
Yeah.
see, this is all information that could have happened even without Sophia there. The parents could come home and be like, where the fuck is Sarah?
Yeah.
Like, I think you're right that it just really was. They were like, how are we gonna make it seem like she still has feelings for Clark, which she doesn't really. They're friends, like that's their thing.
Yeah.
Like they in the last 3 episodes they keep doing that bit that I didn't think was great, but at least showed some kind of history between the two. I'm like, hey, I met my best friend here, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I don't care. But it didn't feel like, oh, maybe she wants to get with him at all. In fact, they were just more like Lana and Lois are becoming friends,
Yes. It's like,
which
okay,
was
cool.
great. There was no jealousy or anything. It was just like, oh yeah, like we are in this
Yeah.
together. Let's get this mayor. He's an asshole.
I completely agree. It felt like, if anything, that kid existed to drive a wedge between Lois and Lana. And then it's like, because at no point am I convinced that Superman actually likes Lana again or wants to go there.
Yeah, like they
From a
showed you when
romantic
he made
standpoint.
his decision to be like, all right, she's happy. She's with someone else.
Yeah.
I'm moving on.
Yeah. The whole issue to me was like, okay, the Kyle of it all, of like, is she gonna stay with Kyle? Or are they gonna break up at the end of the season? Like, is Kyle gonna, not be, such a spaz or all that kind of stuff?
They really tricked me with when Kyle became one of the Kryptonians. I was like, oh
Yes.
shit, they got him, because they, again, good writing. They set up, oh, he's got a drinking problem, and
Yep.
then clearly after he got the powers, they have him pouring out drinks, but you think it like that was him being like, I don't need this anymore. I'm Kryptonian. But you think like, oh, he did something, like something bad happened with
Mhm.
drinking, and so then when he shows up, I'm like, oh, okay, he can help. But then as soon as he said, you're pretty good with that thing, I was like, oh no. What I think? Oh no, here we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, he is not a great person for our sensibilities.
No.
And I was like, I'm glad they're not showing it that just like, oh, he's a small town guy, so he's just salt of the earth. They're like, no, this is how small town people get tricked into screwing themselves over.
Yes.
By being like, oh yeah, the money's coming. Like, yeah, just do whatever you want to us, rape us, and we'll have jobs at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad that they showed like, oh yeah, this is how things get messed up.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree, and you know how he's like there's so much that I feel about Kyle's character, but it's super weird how they walk that line of like, okay, you can't completely hate him, but you can't trust him, and it's just because like there's that when the drinking thing comes up early in the season and he starts yelling and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, here we go, he's gonna do something. Oh wait, he's actually defending Smallville and the people's jobs and all that kind of stuff. He's doing good things in an angry way.
yeah,
It's just it's super weird. It's just super weird how
I
they
just think it's complicated, and
yeah.
I appreciate that it's
Yeah.
not an easy like you this guy sucks.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, he doesn't do everything right, but his intentions were in the right place. He just
Absolutely.
obviously is not. And so I like after he gets the Kryptonian like out of him,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, I can't even go to work. Like people are treating me weird.
Mhm.
It's what they did with Lana, but like for a character where you actively disliked him before, so you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, like they're really laying it on so that you're like you feel bad for him,
Yeah.
and yeah, like he's just like, well, I just wanted us to. They're showing you that businesses are shutting down, and he's just like, I just don't want us to lose out on be like continuing to be Smallville.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I don't like his character, but I respect his character with after that he's like he goes up to Lana, he does a very very good heartfelt apology and be and I mean, sorry, Lois, not Lana. He does a very, very good heartfelt apology to be like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I misjudged you." All this kind of stuff. You
Mm-hmm.
are good for this town. I do like you, and all that. I'm like, this is good stuff. This makes me really like you, and just like, yeah, you're
Yeah,
just a dumb guy.
I feel like Lois really befriended Kyle and Lana, not just Lana. Like, because at one point
Mm.
when she comes to him being like, "Hey, we got to go into the mines. Like, give me access to the mines," and she's like, "I came to you because you're my friends," and I'm like, "Are they?" But I feel like the show shows you her efforts to just be friendly with the like. She goes up to him at the barbecue and she's like, "Well, I wanted a full like rack of ribs or whatever," and they pay that off at the end when he gives her a recipe. But just
Mm.
that she didn't come into it being like, "You listen here, you hicks." Do it. She was just like, she's like, I know you have this town's best interests at heart, which is why I'm dealing with you because
Mhm.
you'll see why this helps you
Yep.
instead of being like, no, you idiots, I know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
just thought that was really good.
I think they do a good job of never painting Lois in that picture of like
Hmm.
never being like I'm a Metropolis kind of gal and I'm above. She never does that. Like there's this one line that she's like, "Yeah, I married a small town boy. What do you think was going to happen?" Like, and I'm
Hmm.
like, that is great stuff. The idea of like, yeah, you married into this, so why would you not have your expectations of what your life would be change and all that kind of stuff, right? It's really really good self-aware writing. That's
Uh,
yeah, it's fantastic.
there's the episode where his half brother, I guess, is reading his thoughts, and so you get to see, it's an opportunity for you to see basically the origin of this Superman.
Yes.
And I like that they made it so that it was very clear that Lois never had any interest in Superman. So it wasn't that she was like, "Oh, look, Superman." She's just like, I'm in love with Clark. Like that's my guy."
Yes. Yeah. That was a great thing because it's just like, oh, like because you're talking about like when she does doing the interview and like her friend's like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
I think
Superman's
he's
giving
really
advice.
into you. And he's like really swiping right now. It's this weird situation. I'm like, I don't I don't see that the way that that character did, but it's really funny of like, hey, that self-aware moment in that same scene where it's like, he's got super hearing, right?
Yeah,
Damn
she's like, it's just a random question. He wouldn't happen to have super hearing, would he? But yeah, I think what was good about it is that they showed you that the reason she was in on uh, Clark is that they show like, oh yeah, Superman does a bunch of great things, but it's burying the main issue we have, which
Mhm.
is we have a full on Nazi problem
Yep.
in Metropolis.
Mhm.
And so then when Clark is like, oh, I want to help you with that, then
Mhm.
she's like, oh, this is someone who actually cares about the right things. It's the
Yes.
same person, but I like that she is attracted to his values in that way, as opposed to being like swept off her feet by the good looking
Mhm.
Superman guy. There is, I did say, like, there is a couple of times in the show where I'm just like, I just don't believe these people don't know he's Superman. Like, there's
Mhm.
this scene with his kids, and I'm glad they did it they did a different thing than I thought they were gonna do. But I told you before you started watching. There's the scene where he's gonna say, "I'm Superman," and he takes his glasses off, and I'm like, "No, don't set these actors up for having to be like, oh, it's you," because he just takes took his glasses off to lift up a truck and show his strength. So I was like, okay. They avoided the the weird like, oh my goodness, the ugly girl took her glasses off, now she's hot. But it was just like, there's just so many times where I'm like, these are people that like truly study Superman. Like John Henry, there's just a point where the AI is like, hey, look, this is her husband. This is probably a problem, right? He's like, nah, he's nobody. I'm like, but you ostensibly have studied this face for years. Yes. Like, I don't even. It seems like they're giving some kind of like 6-year frame here. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe they just kept saying, "Oh, our John Henry Irons died 6 years ago." So maybe I made a connection I shouldn't have, that he'd been on that Earth for around that time, but maybe not. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It just feels like it was like you would have that face seared into your mind and be like, "Well, I'm used to seeing these two faces together. Like that's what's seared into my mind. Superman killing my wife." And both faces are facing me, and you would see that face and be like, "Is that Superman?" Like, I think that's Superman.
I think the most egregious example of that is Lana, and that's why I'm like, "Oh boy, this sucks."
Because in the comics, she does know he's Superman, so
right?
Or at least she knows he has powers because of the Smallville of it all. Like when before he put on a suit, so I'm sure she could make the logic leap. But in this, you're right. Like she's just like, oh my goodness, you know Superman? I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? How does she not know that's Superman?
It's so dumb to me because I'm just like, there's this point where it's like, I can't believe Superman's standing right there. I'm like, really?
Like it should have been a different character, because I like what they were trying to illustrate there, but it should have been a different character.
Yeah.
I think I like that thing of like, yeah, like we see Superman on TV in Metropolis, but to have him be right here, that's surreal. But maybe that should have been Sarah instead of, or Kyle even, instead of the person who grew up with him as his best friend.
Yeah, I wanted it to be like Sophia, like the person at the the small the
Beppo.
person at the Gazette.
I don't remember her name.
So I wanted her to be the person who's like, I can't believe Super, because that would make sense for that character. It really, really would. But for Alana to be like, I would just prefer if they just gave her a character a little bit more to work with. Like, she looks at Superman, she just smiles for a minute and just keeps it to herself. Like, I would have liked that instead of, I can't believe he's standing right there. You grew up with a guy. This is stupid. It's so stupid. With
Superman. It's more that she didn't throughout that whole thing. And I know that they already established that you don't keep memories once you've been imbued with a Kryptonian, but she takes on Superman's mother and has like full-on conversations about how Clark is Superman is the father of Lois's kids, and then just like comes out of that like, yeah, whatever, all right, nothing changes for me. And I'm like, it's already been established that she wouldn't retain those memories, but it's just so weird that they keep putting her in this proximity.
It's so weird, and I'm just like, oh god, Lana's the one that gets the butt end of every one of those issues right now that I hate about in the older versions of like Superman or previous iterations, I'm like, I don't respect the people of Metropolis because they're dumb to not realize that he's Superman.
I think what works about the Metropolis stuff is he's such a loser as Clark that you just aren't like, I understand the idea of like, if you're not predisposed to think of someone in a certain way, it's just not going to come up.
Yeah.
I get that. But again, she saw him before he probably felt the need to act like a nerd. So it just feels like some of the stuff, that energy would be there. But the more I'm thinking about it, maybe the point of her, it being Lana saying, I can't believe it's Superman here, being like, she's never been able to actually see him up close like that before. So she hasn't had time to like connect the two things. Maybe it is to like highlight how Superman is a completely distinct thing to her.
Yeah. I mean, but it's a weird position to put Lana in. It's super
I agree.
Weird.
I think the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, at least they didn't go so heavy into it. They don't. It's not like they continually put her in situations where it's like, you should just know this is Superman, because smartly they don't really have him do a bunch of Superman stuff in Smallville until he has to fight the bad guys, because then it would be obvious. Like, oh, Clark Kent moved here and now Superman's here all the time. Like,
Mhm.
I like that they show him being sneaky and not dressing up, but still using his like ice breath to like put out fires and stuff.
Mhm.
Or like another great moment where he's listening to his kids at high school and then comes to stop a fight, and they're like, "So you fucking listen to us?" I'm like, "This is a good thing. I'm glad this is coming out now." Yeah, like
Yeah.
you just don't give them the privacy. And I mean, as a parent, I was like, I mean, it's worked for you so far, so maybe you probably shut up about it. But like, I get
Yeah.
that in the moment they're like, after he's revealed that he's Superman, you would think, okay, and that also means you would have revealed you listened to us. At least we
Mm.
have that information, but you still kept that from us, so that's annoying. And
Mm.
part of what the show is getting at is that you gotta fully commit to the no more secrets thing of it.
Yeah. And I do like that in the show how, he that's obvious a conflict within their family and he's like, "Okay, I'm not going to do it anymore." So he gives them the pager thing
Yeah, and
and
that's where the
when
grandfather thing comes in.
yeah,
It's all good payoff.
it's really good payoff because it's like for Superman's character for Clark, you're just like, God damn it. Like I trusted that I put faith in this and it's screwing up. And then to his credit, he still doesn't actually eavesdrop on them ever
Hmm.
again, too. He's like he trusts them. It's just like, all right, this is not my kids. It was my father-in-law that got in their head. So I gotta
Hmm.
talk to him. So I really, really like that he doesn't actually lose faith or has his trust broken in his kids and their privacy. It's just like, hey, I'm gonna talk to the my father-in-law because he's doing stuff that I don't agree with at all.
Hmm.
And I like that a lot. I like that a lot. That he just doesn't go back on his words. Like, yeah, I'll drop in every now and then and
Yeah,
listen.
yeah, it's a good point. He never does it. They have to use the button every time if
Yeah.
they're gonna get help. I do like when that they nipped Jordan's habit of trying to like listen in on Sarah in the bud.
Yep.
I thought in a very good way, which was like it
Yes.
wasn't like he was having a conversation with, to him, newish person Sarah. They established he'd met her already one
Mhm.
summer, but it, that she had like a, oh, I can't believe you were listening on me or whatever, because then you gotta deal with his powers and more lying. It was more
Mhm.
like the person he's supposed to be in this with is like, so all of that went out of the window because you heard me talk to someone you like, even though I constantly protect you and I always side on, like I'm always on your side,
Yeah.
and you're doing this. Get the fuck out of my face! Like I was
Yeah.
like, good, good.
I so respected Jonathan in that moment. It's just like Jonathan does that full on knowing it's like, yeah, you're gonna lose any kind of physical fight. You're not an actual threat to him. But it's the idea of like, how dare you betray me like that? And I've been on your team the entire time, and you're just gonna project your
Yeah, like I didn't
shitty.
switch up on you when we got to a new school. Like I
Yeah.
always protect. Like I did it in Metropolis. I'm gonna do it here as well. Like I'm not switching up on you. You can't just like eavesdrop on me like that.
Yeah, I fully am on Jonathan's side on that, and I thought he did such a good job of it, and the fact that he's going through his super hearing kind of thing, and that's the only time you can actually like really get into that point where you're causing a little bit of pain to him is like, yeah, that's good shit. That's really, really good
And that
shit.
it, I mean, they don't say it explicitly, but it seemed like that kind of slowed him down on being able to hone those skills because.
Yes.
But I thought that was interesting story wise. That it was like,
Hmm.
oh shit, like yeah, I did it. I did something wrong.
Hmm.
I'm glad when they're able to figure that out for later in the show, but I do like that Jonathan was like, no, not into it. We got mad at Dad for doing this to us. Why would you do it to me?
Exactly, and that's like the stuff that I'm like, this is why I would understand what Jordan does because he's got that victim mentality his whole life is like, oh, I'm the exception to the rule because I'm using it for what. And he's like, no, these rules apply to you too, bud. It's you cannot do the thing that you're mad about. You can't have that hypocrisy and expect to get away with it just because you have these powers now.
Yeah,
It's such good writing. It's like, yeah, it's exactly how a teenager would abuse their powers.
and I like that he seemingly learned because in the later episodes when they're at that kegger,
Mhm.
the grandfather calls and he's like, we should answer this, and it's Jonathan who's like, no, just be a kid for an hour, like we'll be fine for an hour. But you can tell Jordan has learned his lesson and he's like, I feel like we should, obviously they're kids, so he's like, all right, fine, whatever. But I like that his instinct was like, we should answer this. Like I understand now like what the point of like what our family is like our grandfather's not calling just to be like, hey, I saw an article that made me think of you. Like there's probably something
Yeah.
really serious.
Yeah, he's not just having like he's not feeling lonely. He's just
Yeah.
he's no, it's like, hey, my grandfather's the general of the Department of Defense, and might this might be an emergency.
Yeah.
I like that he connects that as opposed to just being like, yeah, Gramps will be fine, whatever.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's wrong because he ultimately does do that, but I like that they showed that his instinct was like, I've learned from past mistakes, and I
Hmm.
think it's important for us to answer. And I like that Jonathan's decision comes from being like, look, we've had so much taken away from us, like both of us, that let's just take an hour to enjoy this right now.
Yeah, yeah, all stuff that teenagers would do, and it's good writing. It's consistent with
Hmm.
the characters, like, and very few characters feel like, oh, this is really just they should have paid more attention to this. Like you said, the coach,
Yeah,
is
and
definitely
that's
one of
obvious.
those
He's
standout
obviously
characters.
not supposed to be
A
like a
big
character you care
influence.
about too much. It's just
Yeah.
it felt like we already had a bunch of bullies. Like it felt like every kid they interacted with was basically a bully.
Yeah.
So it's just like I don't really need this extra bully energy from the coach.
Hmm.
He could just
Hmm.
be indifferent, and that would serve the same purpose of them feeling like alienated.
Yeah, exactly. If he was just like if the coach was just like saw Jordan getting bullied and just turned away or something like
Hmm.
that, even more effective. But just to have him, like you said, be a cartoon villain in the center, it's like, I'm gonna get away with it, like Hamburglar type shit.
Yeah,
It's just not good. That does stick out in this. But yeah.
but yeah, I think it's a show that won me over for sure. I
Mhm.
think that it's pacing issues aside, like I'm sure they'll sort that out in later seasons.
Mhm.
We keep saying it. It's so well written that what really made me happy was that it didn't fall into tropes. Like you don't have the we use this example every time. You don't have the Foggy and Daredevil thing of like, Dad, you didn't do this. It's like you're Superman. Got it.
Mhm.
Like Lois even says at one point, you don't have to give me an excuse. I know you have an excuse. Just go. Like you're
Mhm.
saving the world.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then just because they say things like that doesn't make it their life easier or the hero's life easier. It just means that that's one less thing that is a contrivance for the to gain tension out of and
Mhm.
conflict. The conflict comes a lot more organically.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's a family. There's always going to be conflict. There's
Hmm.
always going to be crap to deal with, and it's actually interesting because it amplifies it. And I think I couldn't agree with you more in the beginning of the episode where you're like, it was a great decision to have one kid have powers and the other one not,
Hmm.
and then to subvert that expectation to be like, it's Jordan that has it, not Jonathan. Because if Jonathan did have it, I'm like, yeah, I don't like Jonathan because he gets everything. He gets everything at that point. There's no
Yeah, and I
struggle.
like that it's taken away from him and
Yep.
that you watch him deal with it. Like and
Hmm.
understand like when Jordan basically has pneumonia and he's like, so I guess I'm gonna have to come up with more bullshit excuses. And you're like, that would that's enough to fuck with a kid. Like if you're at school and you gotta like keep covering for this stuff.
Completely agree. 'Cause, yeah, you're just constantly lying to people and gaslighting them all the time, and
And then he talks about it when he's like, I told her somewhat of the truth, and somehow that felt worse.
yep.
When Sarah's like, oh, like what happened to Jordan? He's like, well, Tag beat him up, and it's like that's true, but you didn't say exactly why. And he's like, and I don't really like that. Like that doesn't feel great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, telling part of the truth is still manipulating. It's
Yeah.
just.
So I like that everyone is going through it, and
Mhm.
at whatever level makes sense for them as a character.
Yeah, it really does emphasize the importance of like Lois and like her line, the extraordinary people that support these people. It's like, yeah, that is true. Like if Superman was, and I think the show makes a good point of this in the universe that John Henry Irons comes from. Superman, as far as we know, does not have that internet connectivity towards human relationships and all
I mean,
that,
he
and
doesn't
even
have a Lois, that's for
he
certain.
doesn't have a Lois. He doesn't have a love. He doesn't have anything anchoring him. And even then, the AI being like, "Hey, I'm slightly concerned about you because I'm here for your well-being, and it's important for human beings to have meaningful and gainful relationships, which is why I keep pushing you to
Hmm.
try to reach out to someone and do all this kind of stuff. That's good stuff. It's
I like
really,
that he
really
was
good
kind
stuff.
of like on the low, letting Jonathan in. Like
Mhm.
Jonathan was really like between his mom and John Irons, like just being like, "You guys are people without superpowers that still make a difference. Like I will learn from you guys."
Yeah.
I thought it was so obvious, but I just didn't see it coming until it happened. Like when Lois is like, "We can be the extraordinary people." I was like, right, right. Jordan can be like his dad. Jonathan can be like his mom, and I
Hmm.
like that. Right after that happens, there's still like a bit of friction with how they do that, how they execute it, but it still is. You see how Jonathan understands how he can be a part of things without getting in the way or
Hmm.
feeling like, oh, I wish I had powers.
Yeah. Yeah. His character is so well written. It's so well done. And just yeah, he's got annoying points, but he's overall
Yeah,
more of an adult than a teenager in this for sure.
yeah, he
He's
shows
more
a
of an
lot of
adult than
maturity. I
Kyle is. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, yeah.
Kyle's a
I would say
freaking
he
teenager.
shows a lot more maturity than other characters.
Mhm.
Again, the conversation he has with his grandfather about I don't understand how you could be afraid of your family will
Mhm.
always stick with me.
Yep.
That shows a lot of maturity,
Yep. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
especially since he doesn't throw the thing in his grandfather's face. Like, actually, I have seen some
Yeah.
stuff. He's just like,
Yeah.
you can think that if you want. I just think it wouldn't change my mind.
Yeah, I love that restraint that comes from Lois and him. The idea of like, yeah, like you don't know what it's like to have lost a child. And she has a miscarriage, and that's a big deal for her, and all that kind of stuff. Like, yep, that's not the point of this right now. It's not the
Mhm.
point of centering myself. It's let's deal with this actual issue. It's very good. It's very, very good.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to say, or do you want to rate this?
Uh, yeah, let's rate this. I
All right.
think yeah, I think it's good.
I'm gonna give it an 8. I thoroughly enjoyed
I
it.
I'm giving it an 8.5. I
Nice.
it's a lot. So I'm giving it 8.5 because like I said, I my bias towards Superman is like I don't think he's a complex character. This show proved me wrong. It's a
Yeah, he is
good
complex. Yeah.
good stuff. And it's given me a lot of justification for my initial idea of like or fights back against my initial idea of like I don't care about Superman when he's not in the suit. I'm like I care more about Clark Kent than I do about Superman now.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing with the show. I think that they, like Doom Patrol, took characters I wouldn't normally care about. I do care
Mhm.
about Lois Lane. That's wrong. I think every time we've seen a movie, I've locked in on the Lois Lane character. But in general, these aren't like a group of characters I particularly care about and made me
Mhm.
care about them and drew me right in. Just
Mhm.
like Doom Patrol, and like Doom Patrol does feel different from like the Arrow and Flash stuff. And even though I didn't think Titans was as successful for me, it felt different as well. So I like this like era of the Arrowverse.
Yeah, it's the CW definitely had something really really good with what they were producing out here. I think it's great. And plus, uh, for me personally, I'm like, cool. This was done in Vancouver.
Hmm.
I don't have to anchor it in Toronto. It's kind of nice because there's so much stuff that's anchored in Toronto, like The
Oh, and
Boys and
Titans
all
for
that,
sure, yeah,
and
and the
Titans that
boys,
I'm
yeah.
yeah that I'm like, ugh, I kind of don't want to
Well, yeah,
see
because
City
Flash
Hall.
and Arrow are in Vancouver, so it's like,
Yes,
and it doesn't even look like they're in the same places in this show either. So like,
yeah, they do a very good
it's
job
good.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well done show. I'm looking forward to more of us more revisiting it in the future. But
Absolutely.
for now, thank you very much for listening. We're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Contra Zoom Pod, and Springfield Googleplex. If you want to hear those shows, go to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our show, and more shows. And if you want to hear older episodes of our show, please go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at tdfspoiled. Otherwise, please go on all the podcast platforms that you use. Rate, review, subscribe, follow, share with your friends, and do all that great stuff. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Cheers.
This
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.